Watch out, it's a live mic.
This is Mark McNeese in New York City, and you're listening to another edition of the Live Mic Podcast. Welcome to the podcast. This is Mark, and I'm happy to have another author on the podcast. I do really enjoy interviewing writers, and tonight we have Michael Graves with us. And Michael recently had a book called Parade come out, a novel. Was released on October 1st. And he can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But Michael, how are you?
I'm well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Yes, and before we get started at talking about your writing, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? I know from your 6 questions, which I will link to when I post this, you have fabulous answers. I loved your answers. And you talked about having been a writer pretty much all your life. But what else can you tell us about your life?
Well, yeah, I've always been a writer since I was 7 years old, and my grandmother was also a writer. She was a journalist, so she was sort of my idol. So yes, I've always been a writer. Let's see, I'm 35-ish, and I live in Leominster, Massachusetts, which is it's the birthplace of Johnny Appleseed, and it's also the setting for my my debut collection of stories, Dirty One. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's all.
Well, it was also once the plastics capital of the United States.
Yes, sir, that's true.
So we probably all had combs from there.
It's true, and you know, I always tell that story. You know, when you were in elementary school, and you know, you went to have your picture taken on photo day, they would hand you this, you know, flimsy black comb, and it's, you know, comb your hair, which I could never do because I had this mess of curls, and it was just totally impossible. So I just put it in my pocket. And probably somewhere at my mother's house, there's a drawer filled with these combs. But those combs were manufactured in Leominster, along with a lot of like sunglasses and pens and things like that.
It's interesting how I think a lot of our hometowns, I guess. I left Indiana when I was 18, so it's iffy for me to say that is my home. It hasn't been my home for a long time, and I fled. But anyways, Elkhart, Indiana, where I grew up, was the band instrument capital of the United States at one point, and also the RV manufacturing capital for a very long time. So a lot of us probably have these interesting little factoids about where we grew up. I also think it's fascinating that you started writing so young and knew that you wanted to do that, because it was that way for me. I started writing when I was probably 8 or 10 years old, no later than 10. And it was always how I expressed myself, you know, and not everybody knows that, you know, that's their passion at that early age. But can you talk a little bit about how just your journey in going from a child who writes to having this as you know, something not necessarily professionally, but that, like, how did you get from there to where you are now?
I don't know. I mean, I always felt like the world around me was really interesting. And, you know, you talked a little bit about factoids, and for some reason those things kind of inspired me. And I always knew I had something to say, or that I wanted to have something to say, and I wanted to say it. And, you know, I remember, you know, my first sort of like short stories were all holiday centric, and I'm even as a grown up, you know, I love every holiday, and I just felt like there was something special about holidays, and I wanted to say something special. So then they always had a holiday twist, and I mentioned in our 6 questions that my first short story, which was terrible, involved the Easter Bunny and some kind of like romance, and it had a happy ending, and it was terrible. But I knew I wanted to say something special, and I knew too that as a kid I didn't feel like the most like handsome. I didn't feel like the most sporty, certainly not the most sporty. But I wanted to do something really, really well, and or as best I could. And for some reason, the idea of writing and creating a story and telling a story to people really appealed to me. And I felt like, if I work hard, maybe that can be my thing, and maybe that can be my outlet. And it served me, pretty well.
Well, your your collection, Dirty One short story collection, was a Lambda Literary Award Finalist and an American Library Association Honoree. So I'm curious. I'd like to hear a little bit about that. Did you submit stories around? How did you end up with this collection?
I started writing short stories probably, I would think some of those pieces I wrote when I was 18 years old. And I didn't have the idea, or I didn't have the goal of, completing a collection of stories. I just said I want to write. And they all had as a central sort of, theme about suburbia and growing up and being gay. And, but I wrote them one by one. And, the first story I wrote was a piece called, A Snow Day. And then I wrote the title piece, Dirty One, and just felt really, liberated and felt a real love for my characters. And so I just kept going in this little town of young people and parents and, odd neighbors just kind of sprouted up around me. And I just loved writing short stories. And I began, with those pieces. I actually started submitting stories to magazines and contests when I was 11 or 12 years old. But with the pieces from Dirty One, I really was deliberate. I did a lot of research, and I followed, a lot of magazines and journals, and especially gay and lesbian magazines and journals, and started submitting, and really kind of small publications started to pick up the stories. And as I plowed through the collection and the creative process, bigger sort of outlets, or not bigger, I shouldn't say that, but maybe more well-known outlets started picking up the pieces, and I was doing anthologies and things like that, and it just really kind of grew from that. It was very deliberate. I researched constantly, and I was reading constantly, and I was trying to, discover new writers who I felt like were like me or that were being published alongside me. And, but like I said, when I was 11 or 12, that's when I first began submitting. And it's interesting because, I attended Leslie University's MFA program in creative writing, and it was wonderful. But a lot of, writers talk about, submitting, you are submitting, and, it can be terrible, and it can be frightening and just awful. And I never thought of it that way. I always thought of, reaching out to magazines, especially with the stories from Dirty One. I always thought it was terribly exciting. And I would wait, for a response, and I was just, I had no fear. I just felt like, this is so exciting.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really good attitude to have. you know.
I think you have to.
Well, it would be. It's really easy to just. I think. Otherwise, you can just get weighed down by doubt and fear, and what if they don't like this, or what if they write back and say, "I liked it, but,"
That's almost worse, I think. If they say, "Well, no, thank you," and okay, it wasn't meant to be, but if they say, "Well, we liked it, however," then it's it's sort of like that sinking feeling just sinks further down.
Yes. So your attitude is really good. You've also you just have from what you answered when we did the questions, extremely productive. You had a zine, Boy Blunder, that that you took around and distributed in libraries and bars and arcades, and then you also have written nonfiction for the Lambda Book Report, Edge Boston, and the collection Lost Library. You mentioned that you did author interviews and all of that. And before we talk about Parade, which will be the next subject, do you have? I always ask writers about if they have a routine. If you, for instance, when I'm writing, it's always been in the morning. Always, I don't work at night, other than these podcasts. So, do you have a set routine or something that works for you?
Well, I admire you for having a routine, because I certainly, when I was younger, probably before I met my husband, I sort of had a routine, and I would come home and from work, and I would, go for a run or something, and then I would sit down and work and write. And I think having a routine, it is so fulfilling, and it really provides structure. And I'm a person certainly who needs structure in life. But, since going through the publication of Dirty One, and the process for Parade was so different, and I feel like I lost my routine in a way, because I was trying to figure out, no one teaches you how to write a novel. And, everyone has their own routine, their own process, and I had to figure mine out. And I guess my process is, when I can manage, I dive in. And, I really feel inspired by doing free writing and also poetry, which I've published a few poems, and just really just letting go and not having, a sort of end goal in mind, and just really just letting it go. And it's interesting, because I've been thinking a lot about routine lately, because now I'm looking at new projects, and it's interesting. I've really been grappling with the idea of, is a non-routine writing life good for me, or should I really be strict with myself and try to fashion something on my day-to-day life? But as of right now, I don't have one.
Okay. It's always I've heard of so many different responses to that question, and that's why I ask it. It's interesting to me, because once upon a time, I may have thought that there was some, like one way to do it, and you must outline. I've talked to so many writers who don't outline, which is kind of fascinating to me. But anyways, it's that I wanted to talk now about Parade. It did come out on October 1st, unless it didn't.
No, yes, sir, it did.
And Parade is a novel. It's it's put out by Chelsea Station Editions. They said I get their emails now, which is nice. So I'm aware of what they're putting out. And it's described as a tour de force comic tale of religion and government. The book tells the story of Reggie Lauderdale in the midst of his crisis of faith. His cousin Elmer Mott dreams of becoming their hometown mayor. Both boys are doing their best to be adults in suburbia, but have yet to learn to be fully themselves. So tell us about the book, and then I'm also curious about how it's going, and if you do readings, and just a little bit about that stuff.
Well, Parade was really inspired, years and years and years ago, and I keep all my notes. I'm a note person. And, I will scribble things here or there, and I find them years later, and it's so hilarious sometimes. But initially, Parade was a much darker novel, whereas I feel like the version that readers will encounter is very light. And what really inspired me to write this novel had a lot to do with my education. I went to college. I went to Emerson College in Boston, Massachusetts, and it was such a wonderful experience for me, both as a writer and just as a young person, a young gay person. And I was very lucky because I, for some reason, felt compelled to learn about religion. And Emerson, at the time, offered many religion classes, whether it be Eastern religion or Western religion. So I've always been fascinated by religion. I wasn't raised, with religion in our house, and I was just very curious. It was something that it felt like a secret that I wasn't let in on. And when I was a child, I begged my parents to send me to Catholic school, because my schoolmates would talk about catechism, and they had to go, and I'm like, well, I want to go. Everyone else is going, and I prayed. As a child, I felt really guilty because I felt like I don't know what I'm doing, but I feel like I should do something. I should pray, and I should, have talk to God. I feel like I've always believed He was there, and so my religion classes really kind of quenched that thirst for knowledge, and it was amazing. It was such a terrific time in my life. I went to temple. I meditated with Buddhists. It was a wonderful program because it was a lot of reading and lecture, but it was also very hands-on. And I ventured out into the Boston, the places of worship, and learned so much. And I thought, besides my own personal kind of spirituality, what I discovered is, people are less afraid to talk about sex than to talk about God. And I found that so interesting. Mm-hmm. And so from that, this story of two cousins trying to figure out their life, and, a lot of kind of mishaps occur, and they end up creating their own offbeat, glamorized religion and government. And I feel like it's a book within a book, mm-hmm. because one of the main characters, Reggie Lauderdale, crafts what he calls a cookbook, and it's really his version of the Holy Bible. And it's just very, one of the other characters says it's like preschool, because all of these recipes per se are things you learn in preschool. And so the idea of just trying to inspire yourself and others to become better, to be in the moment, to think about other people, to create a sort of community. That really just drives the story, the novel, and I feel like it's a very inspired project, and it still is a mystery to me in a way, religion. But I feel like, as with my characters, I feel like I've learned a lot, and I feel much more spiritual since completing Parade.
And how long did it take you to write?
Forever. No, I'm just kidding. I had probably completed about half of Parade, and was really pleased with it. I loved, I really had the framework for it, and I was just terribly excited. And then I was accepted into the Leslie program, and that sort of put Parade on hold a bit because I sort of worked with some of my mentors, like Michael Lowenthal and Lori Foos. I worked closely with them on really refining Dirty One, and just teasing out some of the kinks. And I knew I wanted to, if anyone was kind enough to publish me, I knew I wanted to publish Dirty One first. Mm-hmm. And so I had to give Parade a break. So I would say probably about 7 years total.
Wow.
Yeah, it felt like forever. But one of my very good friends, I refer to her in my acknowledgments, Mrs. Platten. I teach with her, and one day she said, "I think it's time for you to be done." And I said, "Oh, I respect you so much," and I would get really angry with anyone else who said that. And she said, "Well, I think it's true." And I said, "I agree with you." And I just plowed through and finished Parade.
And since it came out, how's that going?
It's great. I mean, it's I've had some really kind, thoughtful responses, and it's always, I feel like the best part is when people connect and when people sort of, see your vision and understand it. Feeling understood is just the best feeling. And, I sent the manuscript to my publisher, and I'll never forget. It was, I hadn't heard anything, and I was really stressing out about it. And I was at a family function. It was on a Sunday, and I think it was Super Bowl Sunday, which I don't really watch. I just go for the food. And I kind of checked my phone, and and he wrote the most beautiful email to me about Parade, and he just that feeling understood, especially by him, and I admire him so much. It was just the best feeling. But the responses have been really, just humbling and amazing, and it's a fun ride. And I think, especially for a lot of gay authors, mm-hmm. It's a little bit of a hustle, like indie press, and especially gay indie press. You have to learn to hustle, but I've been doing it since I began writing. You had mentioned that I had a zine, and that was a hustle. I mean, I went to bars and libraries, and I've been doing it my whole life, and it's okay. I think about that a lot, and I think, if you didn't have to hustle, would the work still be good? Or, I think all these things, but it's just really fun. It's fun that I get to meet new people. It's fun that I get to, connect with readers, and it's fun to, talk to fellow writers like yourself.
Yeah. Well, I have had a lovely time talking to you, and I knew that you would be a good guest, an interesting guest, and I thought it was a really good insight just a minute ago when you said that being understood is a really good feeling as a writer, because I know I'm interviewing you, but I write gay mysteries for one, mm-hmm. as one of the things that I write, but it's a gay mystery. I mean, there's nothing to understand. It's a gay mystery. It's, it's a mystery. Yeah. It's light, essentially, especially what I write in that realm. But literary fiction is a different matter. And I've mm-hmm. written lots of that. And once in a while, somebody will understand like really understand what you were doing with a story. And that's a great feeling. It's a really good feeling. And it's not even really about validation. It's just knowing that there are other people who are able to see what you see when you're putting these words out.
Right.
If that
and
makes
I
any
think
sense.
too it's about, yeah, absolutely. And I think too it's about connecting because, I've met, for some reason, I don't know why, but one of the short stories from Dirty One called Seahorse has just struck a chord with people. And it's one of my favorite stories. I couldn't ever pick one favorite. They're like my children.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of like fellow writers especially, would buy the book and, I'd meet them and, they would write, "Thank you for Seahorse."
Mm-hmm.
And I felt I felt floored, and I just felt like that's not about me. That's about them. We shared something in common.
Yes.
And it touched them. And I think it is about, that connection as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Michael, I will let you go. It's been just great talking to you. You just sound like such a good spirit, and I wish you all the best of success and
thank you. And thank you so much. And thank you for, just your support and being so lovely and so kind to me.
Absolutely, you deserve it. I mean, everyone deserves it. But it's really nice for me when I'm able to, just to even just acknowledge other people's work, other writing, and help make even a few people aware of them. So I would say it's really my privilege. So
thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I will send this to you tomorrow when I post it.
Perfect. Oh, thank you so much.
Sure. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.